We are taught that wisdom is a gift, a divine light bestowed upon the worthy. In the Sunday school version of history, King Solomon is the ultimate recipient of this light, the man who asked God not for riches or long life, but for the discernment to lead. It's a clean story, a safe story. The wise judge who saved a baby from a sword, the architect who built a house of gold for the Creator. For 3,000 years, this has been the official portrait of the third king of Israel. But when you look closer at the ancient texts, not just the ones that made the final cut, but the ones the scribes tried to hide, the portrait begins to blister, because something in the Book of Kings doesn't add up. We are told Solomon built the temple for God's glory using the wealth of Israel. But what if the labor wasn't human? What if the foundation of the holiest site on earth was laid by the very forces of hell? Today, we're peeling back the wise king to find the Magus, the sorcerer king whose power was built on a dark bargain that the official biblical canon tried and failed to bury. The historical record tells us that Solomon's reign was one of unprecedented architectural ambition. He didn't just build a temple, he built a kingdom. But history also tells us that 10th century Judah was a sparsely populated highland. It was a place of shepherds, not master stonemasons. To build the first temple, Solomon would have needed a workforce and a level of technology that the archaeology of that period simply cannot account for. The Bible claims he used tens of thousands of forced laborers, but even then, the math is unsettling. This is where the first crack appears. Why does the Book of Kings suddenly pivot from Solomon's wisdom to his apostasy with such jarring speed? While the official text attributes the temple's construction to human sweat, there was another tradition circulating in the ancient world. A tradition that whispered a different truth. Solomon didn't build the temple with men. He built it with slaves, just not the kind made of flesh and blood. In the ancient Near East, wisdom carried a secondary, darker connotation: mastery. Specifically, mastery over the unseen forces of the cosmos. Was Solomon's legendary wisdom actually a form of spiritual leverage? Was the wisest man on earth actually the world's first true Magus? To find the truth, we have to look into the pseudepigrapha, specifically the Testament of Solomon. This isn't a book of Psalms. It is a detailed first-person manual of a king who became a jailer of spirits. The story begins with a young boy being drained of his life by a demon named Orneas. Solomon doesn't call for a doctor. He calls for divine intervention. The archangel Michael descends and hands the king a small bronze ring engraved with a seal. This was the Seal of Solomon, a master key for the spiritual realm. With this ring, Solomon begins to summon the demons of the earth. He doesn't banish them, he interrogates them. He demands their names and their utility. The Testament explicitly states that Solomon used these bound entities to build the temple. He forced the demon Beelzebul to saw marble. He made the demon Onoscalis spin hemp for the ropes. He turned the legions of hell into a construction crew. To the ancients, a diamond was an elemental force. Solomon wasn't just a king. He was the first systems administrator of the supernatural. But as any occultist will tell you, once you call them up, you have to find a place to put them. For centuries, theologians treated Solomon's downfall as a moral failing. But the twist is that the temple was a political and spiritual machine. The scribes who wrote the Bible wanted to centralize power, but they had a problem. The memory of Solomon's methods was too complicated to erase. Solomon's wisdom was statecraft. If he could bind the demons that caused drought and war, he was the guardian of the cosmic order. This leads to a radical theory. The temple wasn't just a house for a deity, it was a containment unit. The Testament tells us Solomon bottled the prince of demons in a flask and buried him under the temple. If the temple was built to trap the darkness, then Solomon wasn't an apostate. He was an engineer of the divine, the suppression of the dark. Solomon wasn't about saving souls, it was about consolidating the brand. The priest turned his spiritual engineering into moral failing. They kept the gold but threw away the instruction manual. But you can't bury a secret that deep without it leaking. The Dark Solomon survived in the underground, fueling the grimoires of the Middle Ages. If the temple was a machine built to hold the darkness at bay, what happens to the world now that the machine is in ruins? Every bargain has a price. Solomon's story doesn't end with peace. It ends with the realization that when you build a kingdom using the architects of hell, you eventually become their prisoner. The testament suggests that the demons Solomon had bound were playing the long game. There is a legend that the demon, Asmodeus, eventually tricked Solomon into removing his ring. In that moment, the king was no longer the master. He was cast out, a beggar in his own kingdom, while a shape-shifting entity sat on his throne. This brings us back to the stones of Jerusalem. If the narrative of the Dark Solomon is true, it means that the foundation of the three great Abrahamic faiths was laid by a man who treated the divine and the demonic as mere resources. We like to believe in a clean line between good and evil. But Solomon represents the uncomfortable gray. The first temple was destroyed in 586 BCE, but what happened to the spirits Solomon supposedly trapped within those walls? Some say they escaped. Others believe they are still there, anchored to the bedrock, waiting for a new king. Solomon remains the wisest man to ever live, perhaps because he was the only one brave enough to realize that to see the light, you must first master the shadow.